Well, when I was a little boy sitting on my mama's...
Hi, welcome to Going Deeper. My name is Marcie Sclove, and today I'm sitting with John Bechtold and a couple of his students from the ARHS Regional High School Theater Department. So they all are receiving one of the Sammy Awards coming up from the Jones Library on April 26th. And we're going to be talking about who they are and why they are receiving this award. The award is specifically for significant contribution to Amherst literary culture. And I really like the sound of that, about the culture. So, welcome, John.
Thank you.
And Zach.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. We're going to be talking a lot about the high school and your theater department, but I always like to start by asking, what was it in your early life that planted the seeds for you to be on this path of so much creativity and theater and also your leadership skills?
Well, there's a good well to go in there, I think. I grew up in upstate New York in a very rural section north of Ithaca. And for one, I had no neighbors for a few miles. So we just had woods and fields. And anytime friends would come over, it would be kind of an event because everything was an effort to either come or go somewhere that was about 15 or 20 minutes. And what that meant is that I got to spend a lot of time in the woods and in the fields and making things up. And it was a giant playground, and I think that contributed a lot to my sense of anything from like designing or building a set, picturing a world, imagining characters in that world. It was all just kind of readily there, I think, from the start.
Yeah.
And then somewhere along the ways, in middle school or high school, I started realizing I liked theater and I liked acting. I think a big part of that, I enjoyed getting attention as a kid, and so that was just an easy first draw. But then it became something else altogether that I really genuinely loved. And on the leadership end, I think that that's always been something that I guess I've like been happy to do or into. In middle school and high school, I was usually a student officer of something or another. I'd like doing those kinds of things. And my nickname in college was Meeting Man by one of my friends because I would never hang out with them because I had another meeting I had to go to. And
So you had a bunch of siblings, right?
yeah, 3 siblings.
3
brothers.
And what's your birth order?
Number 2 of 4.
Okay, because sometimes that has something to do with leadership.
Well, I think that makes
also.
me more of a diplomat than a leader to put me in there. So
That's interesting.
yes, but those are good skills too.
Yeah. So I read an article about you, John, where you talked about intuition and the importance and the use of your intuitive self, both in terms of when you get blocked, but also just, helping you with your creative process. I'm really interested in that and wondered if you wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I think one part of anyone's process in a creative field is running into obstacles, sometimes ones that you didn't expect, sometimes ones you kind of put there for yourself to make a problem more interesting, I guess. So I think generally speaking, I think this especially is true in school. We're generally taught that obstacles or failing at something is a bad thing that you mostly want to avoid or not encounter. And for the artistic process, it's essential that you run into problems or make problems or fail. So for me, some of those problems lead to some of the most enjoyable solutions. So the intuition part, I think, just kicks in there. You can't problem solve your way out of something. I think a lot of the times you have to realize that there's some thread that runs a bunch of things together that you didn't see before. And that's where the intuition comes in. I think I definitely am not the kind of creative artist where I have a master plan too much. I think I like having a strong structure and then figuring out the rest along the way.
Yeah. I can also imagine that the same way that a play comes together with all these parts, the lighting, the setting, all that, something about when you are in a pickle, not knowing, where to go next, that something's happening internally to get that, to get those pieces together.
Yeah, I think that's true. And usually it's just acknowledging that there is a problem of some kind and then leaving room for something to come up. I often find that the solutions come up when I'm away from the problem itself. So waking up in the middle of the night and having a realization about something, or just being completely in a different kind of space or venue, and then for whatever reason the show comes back in and tells you what it wants, and then your only job is to be aware when that moment happens and write it down somewhere.
It's the awareness. That's right. That's really cool. So Zach, welcome.
Thank you.
Glad you're here too.
Thank you.
What about you? What brought you to the theater department?
Well, I've kind of been a hyper kid my whole life. And I think theater was something that was very interesting to me, but I didn't really want to be like the one on stage. And one of my really good friends, who was the tech director last year, got me into tech after I saw an immersive show that we did 3 years ago, I think. And we're actually doing a rendition of it this year, towards the end of the year.
What's the name of that show?
We called it Bum Bum Then. It's going to be a different name this year, but it's going to be the same kind of format, small immersive scenes. But yeah, so I went through that, and I was just kind of like, wow. And I started doing tech for the musical that year, and it just kind of went from there.
Wow. So I'm glad you brought up the immersive theater thing, because I'm very curious to hear you speak more about that. Is it that you decide a show is going to have that in it or not? Is that sort of where you start?
Usually I think we start with the intent to make an immersive show. In most cases.
Always.
In most
Okay,
cases. We started making immersive work at the high school in 2010. And ever since that, we knew that we wanted to accord some space somewhere in the calendar to do work of that kind. So in that case, yeah, we would say that we're doing an immersive show in this space, and as we got closer to the show, we'd start to build around that idea. We do see it as a kind of unique genre of theater that needs its own deliberate attention.
And what is it exactly?
I think the easiest definition is a kind of theater where the audience is put into the world of the show. They're not an outsider to it. They're in some way have space within the show itself. So they could have a lot of agency, they could have minimal agency, but they're there with us in that space.
And does that kind of require a certain kind of audience? Like, I could imagine myself being a little shy in some of those contexts.
This might be great for Zach to pick up, because he encountered the theater company through a very agency-heavy immersive show when he was talking about.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that immersive theater is really interesting because it can, especially with that kind of show that I got into, which is like you go basically from scene to scene, and you're kind of in control of the scene. In a way, you have a lot of sort of pull in terms of where the scene goes.
Wait, you being an audience person?
Yeah, you being the audience member, you're the third person that's in the scene, or however many, but like.
Sure.
And so I think that what's cool about immersive theater is that no matter who you are, it can sort of form around your personality. So you might be a shyer person. The actors are trained and everything to sort of work with you in the scene to still create a scene that is enjoyable or that has some sort of storyline to it.
Yeah.
But I think, that's just, I think what's really cool about immersive theater is that it has this malleability to it that really can form around any kind of audience member.
It sounds like it offers the actors another level of sort of a skill to be able to assess what the audience person needs. And
Absolutely. It has to do several things. I think we often compare theater to film when we're talking in classes about how film get to do takes and retakes until you get the scene just right. On theater, you don't have that option, but a scene will end. In a lot of immersive theater work, the actor's sustaining something in that world. There's no stage wing to disappear into. So there's this long sense of sustaining energy, and when you bring to that, in addition, this audience member that does have some level of control over what the scene is happening, it's not the same as doing improv theater on stage. You're actually trying to share space with someone that might need a hand or be given a gift, where they're not meant to be the butt of a joke or the end point of something, but rather the subject that's in control.
Okay, wow.
So that gives an actor a whole lot that they have to do and manage.
Okay. It's making more sense. So you're going to be having at least one performance coming up for the rest of the year in that form of immersive theater.
That's correct. And it's a very wide form.
Yeah.
We're saying, too, that every project that we've done tends to have a different flavor to it as far as what that
Sure.
role is. But this one, as Zach said, we are reprising something, a kind of format that we really like. Where the audience member goes through a series of scenarios in a wide geographic space. So you keep dropping into new rooms and new spaces, and you drop into new identities as you go as this audience member.
Gosh.
And your job is to you always get to be the star of everything. You're never made to be embarrassed or the butt of something. You just have to adapt, and we adapt to you.
That's a good point, though, for folks, local folks who will be watching this. How do people find out about your performances coming up?
The school website, and specific to that, there's a performing arts website that always posts our performances. So we'd recommend that you find us online.
Okay, good. That's really helpful. I want to hear about the Ghostlight project. And this is segueing into a bigger topic that I wanted to talk about in terms of just stuff going on with race and equity in the high school. And I'm going to also be mindful that I want Aviva to have a chance to weigh in on some of these questions too. So, yeah, start with the Ghostlight
Sure.
project.
It might be worth kind of framing this really
Yeah.
quickly. It is a national movement that
Right.
was started last January of 2017, largely in response to the change of office in the White House and a concern that the arts were under threat, but also that the arts had a critical role to play in the questions of social justice and equity across the country. And this Alliance of Theaters wanted to step up and make themselves known and dedicate themselves to work that pursued those aims. And any group could effectively sign on, but then had to kind of commit themselves to finding ways to bring that work, whether it's just into the process of what they do, or if it's actually into a theatrical performance of some kind or the rest. So,
And what's what does Ghostlight mean? What's that reference?
sure. Actually, do you know this?
Yeah,
why don't
so
you take it?
a ghostlight it's sort of been a tradition in theaters for a while. Actually, I don't know quite how long, but a long time. It's basically that they leave one light on stage, or it's either on stage or backstage, somewhere in the performing arts area, that is supposed to stay on and kind of keep that spark of the theater alive while no one else is there to sort of keep performing
You
or
mean like
keep
in the middle of
engaging.
the night
Yeah.
when no one's in the
Yeah.
building? I see. Huh.
Yeah, in between shows. And in this case, the metaphor turns into a sort of beacon,
Okay.
which is why the project named the way it was.
Ghostlight. Interesting. So, what are you doing at the high school in this realm?
So something's coming right up, actually.
Oh.
America's most produced playwright, whose name is Lauren Gunderson, in 2017, just wrote a play in response to the Parkland, Florida shootings just a couple of weeks after the event itself.
Which wasn't that long ago to begin with.
Not
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
And her intent in writing this play, it's a one-woman play, about an hour long, is to mount and perform readings of this play on the 20th of April in as many theaters across the country as possible. And a lot of the Ghostlight project members have rightfully jumped on this as a collective kind of action. And that indeed is the next thing that we're doing.
Wow.
We're working in alliance with a composer named Jenny Jeering, who is a local composer, but also a friend of that playwright, and is helping
Okay.
produce it here. So they're bringing in a professional director and actor, and then both students from Amherst Regional High School and Northampton High School will be involved in and around the
Nice.
project.
The whole movement that's come about by the students themselves is really very powerful. So you're talking about collaborating with Northampton. I'm curious, because another topic that's kind of big, and I do want to get back to race stuff, but what about your relationship to the PVPA charter school? And like you have a very strong, vibrant theater department and performing arts, program at the high school. Are you at all in collaboration with PVPA, or how are you all seeing each other?
It's a great question. I think also that you might have some responses too, because the Valley is a small place and students know each other and teachers know each other. One thing I would say just on my end is that often our programs get very busy and we just start focusing on our own shows. Done very much with PVPA. Northampton is a good example. We actually did a theater exchange with them last spring where our two programs brought work to each other's schools and as a way of getting to know each other.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is incidental, but in that case, I think the thing that we prioritize is building, those kinds of partnerships and collaboration.
It seems important for people who are swaying toward a performing arts kind of education know that your performing arts department is so strong.
Yeah, I think on those terms, I think that is important to note that
Yeah.
I believe a lot in public high school education. I don't have deep-rooted fundamental problems with the charter movement, but I do think that at its core, our best hope is in the public schools and that sense of centrality that they can offer a community.
Sure.
And when you can have a department that is ripping along that in the way that I think ours is, encased in that bigger school, that's a perfect world for me.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that would be great. And how has the theater department sort of educated students or gotten involved in issues of race and equity? What's going on in terms of all that stuff in your department?
I'm happy to pick this up unless you
Yeah,
want.
well, I mean, I have a little bit to say on that. We have a lot of conversations with Beck, me and Aviva specifically, about just sort of the atmosphere in the theater department. And one thing that he's always very adamant about is that his goal is to make the musical especially, but really any theater production, to be like racially and socioeconomically and like in terms of gender and sexual identity, to be representative of the school population. And I think we strive for that a lot. Sometimes we hit that, sometimes we don't. But I think the biggest thing is that anyone can get involved with any of our productions. And a lot of the time it's about like reaching out to different people and making sure that they know that they're able to get involved.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's always that question when people of color, for instance, don't get involved. Is it because of something on their end, or is it something about the institution that doesn't feel inviting or welcoming or comfortable?
Institutions, I think, always have a role to play in that, and
Yeah.
I don't think our program or school is exempt from that.
Sure.
We have our share of work to still do on that, but I think the first part is to name it.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that theater historically has been largely a white province. If you look at most of the shows on Broadway or where popular theater shows up, you still see largely white faces. So this is both a local and a national set of questions, but what better place to really try to instigate something than at the start of people's careers and work?
Exactly, exactly. That's great. So, do you have a favorite show that you were part of this year or last year?
I think that the 25th Annual Putnam County Spelling Bee was really sort of my big huzzah type of show. It was just, I'm the tech director this year, and it was sort of, the set especially, but really the production as a whole kind of felt like my baby in a way, especially because
Now-
I was able to like lead a lot of other high schoolers through it.
Was that one of the shows that John wasn't there for?
No, that was
Okay.
that was the musical this year, and he was here for that.
Okay.
The one earlier this year was Henry IV, and that was another beast. It was, I think, the bigger challenges with that were involved with sort of just the organization, because we kind of have this lifeline with Beck. They definitely give a lot of responsibility to the leaders,
Yeah.
especially the tech director and stage manager, which
Yeah.
Aviva is.
Right.
But there's always kind of that like fallback. Like if we need to figure this out, we can always go to Beck. But we kind of had that. We could call him if we needed to, but
Yeah.
there was a lot more sort of problem solving that had to happen this year, which was definitely great. A great experience to have.
Are you planning on going on in theater in college? Or?
I think I want a minor in college. I think that I have some other interests that are more
Like what?
career oriented. I'm really interested in medicine and science and things
Oh,
like that.
wow.
But I
Good
definitely
for you.
don't want to drop theater
Yeah.
from my sort of plate. I think
Yeah.
that it's definitely a really important part of my life, and I want to keep that going.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I think we're going to stop here, give Aviva a chance to say her 2 cents. And yeah, any last words before you come to the show?
Yeah, just stay involved in the community, especially with the high school theater department, because we put on great shows.
Yeah.
That I honestly think people should come to, not just because
Your
you
kid
would
is in it.
support, you would
Exactly.
support us, but also just because they're quality shows that I think
Yeah.
people will enjoy.
My husband and I got off sort of our pattern, but we were coming to shows long after our daughter graduated, and now we'll be looking at that website to see what's coming up. It's a great department. Okay, well, thank you. And we'll close for part 1. Thanks for joining us and Going Deeper.
Well, when I was a little boy sitting on my mama's knee, she said, son, let me tell you about that bad stagger lee. She said, son, he was a bad man, Lord, the baddest man I know. Well, he killed Bill